Tonight, the teachers union is showing no love for the Gov. It is one of many groups blasting Andrew Cuomo's plan to give tax credits for parents sending their kids to private schools. Then Mayor Bill de Blasio unveils his sweeping plan for the city's public housing authority. We'll debate whether it'll actually help the people it's supposed to help. And yet more controversy in East Ramapo. The push for more state control of the school district appears to be in trouble. It looks now like Albany is punting instead of acting. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. And tonight we start by educating you about an education proposal from Governor Cuomo that's generating a bit of heat. His plan to give parents a $500 tax credit for each kid attending a private school is facing opposition from teachers unions and many other public education advocates. To be eligible, annual family income would have to be below $60,000, but that's only part of the debate. The question is it a good idea to be subsidizing private education? Let's ask our panel. Joining us tonight, Noam Bramson. He is the Democratic mayor of New Rochelle. He was the 2013 Democratic nominee for Westchester County Executive. Welcome back. Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author. And C. Scott Vanderhoff is with us, an attorney and five-term Rockland County Executive. Welcome to the program. So we have debated this on the show a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and I'm curious as to our two executives on the table. And Scott, I'll start with you. The idea of subsidizing private education with public money, or perhaps even subsidizing kids who are going to religious education or religious schools. Any concerns about that?
I served on the school board for 6 years, and I'm a very strong believer in public education and have real strong beliefs about making sure we support public education. But I don't have a problem with this. It's a $500 credit. It's not that much. It's income-based. And quite frankly, it seems to me in New York State, one of the things we should have is competition in education. I think this may help do that.
There's the slippery slope argument comes up all the time in politics, that this is the beginning of a trend, and that could you make that, I certainly could make that argument, that it's a slippery slope. Once you start subsidizing for $500 kids on the low end, that could go to $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, and the means testing could go up. Any concerns that this could spread wider?
Well, I think there's a strong enough push against it from a democratic point of view that I don't see it as getting out of control. And I do think that one of the things we need to do, I think all of education needs to be reassessed, not the way the governor has approached it, by the way. But I think that, we spend a lot on a per pupil basis across this country, particularly in Rockland and Westchester counties. I think the whole thing needs to be looked at very carefully. I don't think this is the end of a good public education that we can find.
Noam, does the Cuomo plan to subsidize private education jeopardize public education?
Well, look, I'm not a big fan of transferring public dollars to private education, either directly or indirectly. And I recognize and respect that every parent should be able to make whatever choice they want about how their children are educated. And for some parents, that's going to mean private or parochial education. That's fine. We should have free choice in that regard. But when you talk about transferring dollars, that's a different story. And it seems to me we ought to be more focused on making sure that all of our public schools, especially those that are serving children in underprivileged communities, have the resources they need to provide the best possible educational opportunities to those youngsters. And anything that moves us away from that goal, I think, is problematic.
Do you have any separation of church and state concerns here when you're talking about tax credits essentially for, in a lot of cases, religious schools?
Look, I would let judicial experts sort that out.
I'm going to make you the judicial expert tonight.
I'll dodge that question as a non-lawyer, but for me, you don't even have to get to that point. It's more fundamental. I don't think we should be using public resources to subsidize private education.
Okay, so no judges on the panel tonight, but we're certainly all fairly well schooled in politics. Dom, how much of this proposal is political in terms of the shifting support, Governor Cuomo lining up, it seems like, against a lot of the teachers' unions? How much of this is a political play? How much of this is actually designed to help kids?
I think it's all designed to help children. I respect what the mayor is saying because we know that his heart is in the right place. But history has just shown me, as it relates to the school system in New York City, the UFT and the unions, they're always going to scream bloody murder whenever. Giuliani was right about one thing, and he said, the education system, it really isn't a jobs program. And it's not about just jobs for education. It's about the kids. It's about the kids. When parents are given a choice in 2015 to either send their kids to public schools or private school, Which option do they choose? I ask you, Andrew, more often than not.
Well, it depends on the district that they're in. It depends on the means that they have at their disposal.
Okay, let's say the average district in a minority area of New York City, or an area where it's not the Stuyvesants or the Bronx Science. If they're given an option, public school or a Catholic school, which one do they choose?
I think in the urban environments that you're describing, it's more often going to be the private school or the religious school or the charter school.
Okay, so then aren't parents voting with their feet in their decisions?
If they can.
Right, if they can. So if that's what they're choosing to do, why should, as the county exec pointed out, this is only a $500 tax credit, why not help them? Why not help the middle class?
But if you extrapolate out, Mr. Mayor, what Dominic said, you represent a city, the 7th largest city in New York State. Isn't that essentially the death knell for public schools, especially in urban environments? Because everybody will migrate away from the public school system.
Potentially, and that's really the problem. So I respect what Dominic's saying, but remember, if people want to make that choice, it's because something is going wrong in the public schools. And it seems to me we should be confronting that challenge head on and ensuring that our public schools are ones in which parents feel confident that their children are getting the right kind of experience. Further problem is, especially if you provide a tax credit of this relatively small amount, my guess is it's only a fraction of parents who will actually be able to benefit from it. And the result will be that some parents extract their kids from the public schools, and that the majority of children who remain in the public school system may actually be worse off than they are today. So we need to look at this holistically and have a system in place which provides the greatest number of kids with the best possible educational opportunities. That's not happening today for a variety of reasons that are separate and apart from the conversation we're having right now. But I think on balance, this would make things worse, not better.
Not really, Mayor. I have to disagree there. I mean, it has failed. It's a failed system. It fails and it has continued to fail. So you need a new dynamic, a dynamic where there's more competition, where the schools are embracing and investing money better in the public field as well as the private field. It's time to change the dynamic. And while it's not enormous, I think it's a very important effort.
But is this really an area where competition makes the difference as opposed to just a concerted focus to try to improve public schools? I mean, the competition that's coming from charter schools or from private schools in this case, if they're subsidized, does that really push public schools then to get better, or at some point does the whole system begin to fall apart as students and
the
parents
system
send their
is
money
falling
elsewhere?
apart in certain areas anyway. It's falling apart. And what you need to do is reinvest. I agree with the mayor in this one. I mean, you've got to invest in there, and there should be a different. The school aid formula, by the way, is so fouled up. It's fouled up across the country. It actually is across the state, rather. But having said that, there is a way to tackle this in a holistic manner, and I think the way to do it is to also provide private educators the opportunity to teach our children along with public education. And you know what? One final point on this: the union doesn't. I mean, it's important, teachers are important, but the union doesn't control what happens. What happens is the policymakers who make sure that kids are educated, and that's what we need to be focused on.
All right, well, we want to get everybody at home involved in this conversation. Head over to Facebook, head to Twitter, sound off on our question. Should parents get a tax credit for sending their kids to private or in some cases even religious schools? When we come back, Mayor Bill de Blasio released his new plan for the city's troubled public housing agency earlier today. It would create more affordable housing, but it's also creating a lot of questions and concerns. We'll explain.